Hi, I'm Molly Gummerson, and I'm a doctoral student in the psychology program at Keiser University. Today, we're going to be discussing how trauma affects student learning and behaviors through the eyes of researcher S. Friends. All right, let's get to it. Okay, each year, more and more students enter school having already experienced trauma. Things like violence, abuse, illness, or even the loss of a loved one. How about extreme poverty? Exposure to trauma doesn't just affect their emotions in the moment, it creates these lifelong challenges such as anxiety, depression, or other mental health struggles. In the classroom, trauma often shows up through difficulties with focus, memory, behavior, and poor academic grades, basically. And also low attendance. They miss more days of school. They also find it harder to connect with others, often leading to social isolation. Their overall learning and development can be deeply impacted by trauma. As educators and school staff, we play a crucial role. Support can be as simple as everyday positive interactions or as structured interventions that are specialized. Both traditional and creative approaches, whether individual counseling or group programs, can greatly help students build resilience and succeed despite what they've been through. A lot of times we hear the word resilience and we think of it as a buzzword, but it really deeply impacts their ability to succeed in the future, especially for these students that have trauma. Before we go any further into talking about traumatized students in schools, let's talk about what trauma really is. Childhood trauma refers to experiences that are so overwhelming that they disrupt a child's sense of safety and ability to cope. Trauma can happen anywhere from one major event like a serious car accident, natural disaster like a hurricane, or witnessing violence, especially domestic violence. It could also come from ongoing stress, such as repeated abuse, neglect, or constant conflict in the home. For instance, think of a child growing up in a household with daily arguments. Even if they're never directly harmed, the fear and the unpredictability, also known as like walking on eggshells, never directly harmed, but that still trains their brain to stay in constant fight or flight mode. This can lead to problems like trouble focusing, impulsive reactions, quick anger, and the biggest one, anxiety. Another example is a child who loses a parent unexpectedly or their home unexpectedly. Beyond the grief, they may develop deep anxiety about losing others or losing other things, their belongings. They have difficulty forming secure friendships or even face long-term health issues because of the prolonged stress on the body. Trauma doesn't look the same in every child, though. Its effects include challenges with emotions such as anxiety or sadness and behavior, acting out or withdrawing, as well as learning, struggling to concentrate, or dropping in performance. The idea behind this is a child's behavior is often a reflection of what they've been through, shifting our perspective from, hey, what is wrong with this kid, to what happened to this child. It allows us to respond with empathy and support so that we can help heal, so they can learn, so we can get past trouble focusing, lower grades, and skipping school. And how about the dropout rates? The important takeaway is that children's behaviors often reflect their experiences. When we see a child struggling, we ask, what happened to you? Instead of what's wrong with you. This helps with healing and growth of that child. And together as educators, we can help children overcome trauma so they're not academically and behaviorally behind their peers. One way to look at trauma is through the lens of Jean Piaget, a renowned researcher in the stages of child development. Piaget described 4 stages of cognitive development: the sensory, motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational stages. Each stage reflects a different way children think and understand the world around them. But when trauma is present, it can alter how children progress through these stages. During the sensory motor stage, this is birth to age 2. Infants and toddlers explore and look and learn through touch, sight, and movement. Their sense of safety develops through consistent caregiving. Trauma, such as neglect or abuse at this stage, can disrupt that foundation, leaving the child anxious or less willing to explore their environment. There's also a lack of trust. In the pre-operational stage, ages 2 to 7, children will begin to use language and imagination, but still see the world mainly from their own perspective. If trauma occurs, like witnessing violence or losing a caregiver, children may misinterpret events, blame themselves, or act out their fears through play. The concrete operational stage, ages 7 to 11, is marked by logical thinking, an understanding of rules, and a sense of fairness. Trauma at this stage may interfere with concentration, memory, and emotional control. A child may struggle academically or develop negative beliefs about themselves and others, such as, "This is my fault. My parents have split because of me. We are poor and facing money struggles because I asked for a toy, because I asked for a book, because I asked for a phone." This makes it difficult for learning in relationships. In the formal operational stage, age 12 and older, adolescents begin thinking abstractly and considering the possibilities beyond the present. Trauma during adolescence can complicate this by shaping negative worldviews. Teens may expect rejection, struggle to trust, or feel hopeless about the future, which affects both identity and relationships. This is a big time for teenagers because if they're seeing their world crumble at home and they're seeing their parents split, how are they going to trust relationships in the future? Maybe they'll say, "Why bother? Okay, because I don't want to have what I'm seeing right now." The important point is, while Piaget, one of many researchers that has studied cognitive development in children, described development as a universal consequence, trauma can slow, interrupt, or reshape the way children move through these stages. It doesn't stop development, but it changes the path and ultimately the outcome. Recognizing these disruptions allows educators, caregivers, mental health professionals, and basically all of the stakeholders to step in and help children restore a sense of safety and continue their growth. How does trauma affect a child's behavior in school? We've seen it. We know the behaviors. We don't understand where this is coming from. Why did they do this? What were they thinking? Trauma often follows children into the classroom and can have a powerful effect on their behavior. When a child has lived through stress or adversity, their brain may stay on high alert, ready to react to danger, even if in a safe setting, such as school. One of the first places this shows up is in emotional regulation. A child may seem quick to get angry, cry, or appear unmotivated, but these are often survival responses rather than intentional misbehavior. Trauma also interferes with concentration and learning. A student who is worried about safety at home can find it nearly impossible to focus on lessons, leading to restlessness, zoning out, or avoiding work. Finally, trauma influences relationships with peers and teachers. Some students withdraw, keeping to themselves, while others push boundaries or act out. We've all seen this in the classroom. Both behaviors are ways of testing whether adults are reliable and whether the classroom is a safe place. The big idea that we need to think about with this, and the key point, is when we see challenging behaviors in school, these might be signs of trauma. In fact, most of the time, they are. And what we need to do is we need to stop and say, instead of asking, what is wrong with this child? We have to think, what has this child experienced? What is driving this behavior? Like, where is this coming from? Once we start to have that shift, as educators, we respond with empathy and we can provide stability that children need to learn and succeed in the school classroom setting. How does trauma affect a child's academic performance in school? Trauma often shows up in the classroom by disrupting a child's ability to learn. When a child has lived through stressful or frightening experiences, their brain is hardwired really, to stay alert for danger instead of focusing on academics. How can anyone focus on academics in school if they have major situations going on in their home lives? One example of how we're seeing this right now is with our migrant students that come to school with anxiety and fear of what their situation might be when they go home due to the changing political climate. Okay, so another impact okay, with learning and trauma is attention and memory. A student who is preoccupied with fear, like I was explaining, or stress may find it hard to listen, follow instruction, or remember lessons. This can make even routine assignments feel very overwhelming. And what happens when we feel overwhelmed? We shut down, right? Trauma can also affect attendance and participation. Children dealing with difficult home situations may miss school more often or withdraw during class activities. Over time, these missed opportunities create gaps in learning and lower academic performance. Another challenge is self-confidence. Trauma can cause children to doubt their abilities, give up easily, or feel frustrated when faced with challenges. Instead of seeing mistakes as a part of the learning process, they may view them as proof that they just can't do it. They can't succeed. Overall, trauma can interfere with every part of the learning process: focus, memory, attendance, and motivation. Understanding these impacts allows schools to provide safety, encouragement, and support so students have a better chance at succeeding academically, right? We want them to do this. We want those students to get ahead that have the ability. And the ones that need the extra help, we want to be able to give that to them, right? Without having to jump these hurdles of things going on that are beyond control of the school. So a big role that we have to play is being an empathetic caregiver. As we come to the conclusion of this slideshow, it's clear that trauma is not something children simply leave at the school door. The experiences of violence, abuse, illness, poverty, and loss that many of our students carry with them shape how they see the world, how they behave, and how they learn. These impacts can be severe and long-lasting, ranging from mental health struggles like anxiety and depression to difficulties with concentration, memory, and academic performance. Also, it should be noted that disruptive behaviors often mask deep pain or fear, and we have to remember that when we're asking ourselves, why? Why are you doing that? Trauma has the power to interrupt a child's development on multiple levels. It can reduce school attendance, lower reading achievement, and affect emotional regulation, leading to behaviors that are often misunderstood as defiance or laziness. But when we look deeper, as we have through the research of Friends, we see these behaviors for what they really are. They're survival strategies. Trauma alters a child's sense of safety and trust, and the classroom becomes yet another arena where those struggles will play out. This research also highlights hope in the form of resiliency. Not all children respond to trauma the same way. Some develop resilience and continue to succeed, while others need targeted and specialized support. The difference often lies in the adults and communities around them. As they say, it takes a village. Teachers, counselors, and schools can make a critical difference. Everyday practices like greeting students at the door, showing them genuine care, interest in their interests, and creating safe, consistent routines can foster trust. Kids love structure. They may say they don't, but they love structure. They need it. More structured interventions, from trauma-informed classroom strategies to specialized programs, provide additional tools to help children process their experiences and regain control over their learning and behavior. The challenge is that many teachers feel unprepared for this role. One minute you feel like a teacher, the next minute you're playing social worker, right? That's what's happening in our society right now. Most educators are not formally trained in trauma interventions, aka trauma-informed. And yet they're often on the first line of support for these students. And it is draining sometimes, right? Without that proper training, it can be very draining. But you're essential. As educators, you are so essential. Schools must invest in equipping educators with the knowledge and the resources to recognize trauma, respond with compassion, and connect students with appropriate supports. Ultimately, what this research makes clear is that addressing trauma is not separate from teaching. It is emotional well-being that needs academic success that cannot be separated as a process. When children feel safe, cared for, and supported, they're more able to focus, learn, and grow. As educators, our role is not to erase the trauma, but to provide safe spaces where students feel secure enough to heal, to trust again, and to reach their potential. In closing, trauma may create barriers, but does not define a child's future. With awareness, compassion, and the right strategies, schools can become places of stability, resilience, and hope. Places where every student, regardless of their past, has a chance to thrive. Now we're going to talk a little bit about future research. So, long-term impact studies. We need more longitudinal research to track how trauma exposure affects students not only during the school years, but also into adulthood. Imagine a 10-year study starting at grade 6. Imagine the data that we could have from something like that. Many existing studies capture short-term outcomes such as attendance, behavior, reading levels, but we need clearer evidence on how these interventions influence long-term academic success, career readiness, and mental health. Career readiness, also known as employability, is a really big construct that's being directed in professional development right now, because if we can't launch these students successfully into adulthood, then they're going to fail. All right. Additionally, we need to compare intervention effectiveness. Future research should explore which interventions work best for specific trauma types, such as violence, illness, and loss, and which are most effective in school settings versus community settings. We also need to diversify our interventions. Teacher training and implementation. Although many districts are now relying on trauma-informed care in their PDs, there's still a gap on how well teachers are prepared to respond to trauma. Studies should focus on the outcomes of professional development programs in trauma-informed practices, examining not just the teacher confidence levels, but also the measurable effect on student learning and behavior. Lastly, resilience, the buzzword. Some children with high exposure trauma show resilience and succeed, but others, they struggle deeply. Future research should investigate the protective factors, such as family support, peer relationships, cultural identity, or community resources that help foster resilience despite trauma. We also can take a look at ourselves. What trauma are we bringing into the classroom from our own childhood? I want to thank you for taking the time to go through this PowerPoint and have a better understanding of children in trauma and the school environment. I want you to take a look at my references that are listed here on this final slide. I also want to note that I use the artwork of Banksy in the background of all my slides because I felt that his artwork was always very emotional and reminded me of childhood trauma. It reminded me of how everybody is different emotionally. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.